at a meeting in Dallas, Texas, with the Meadows Mental Health Policy Group. They're a nationally recognized group that help to fund and help direct funding to different programs that help to support the mental health needs. East Central, we were talking, and I said, I live in a district that has a program that's a little uniquely different from those programs that were being discussed that could be implemented. And I can tell you, I was very proud, because when they said, what district is it you're speaking of? I said, it's East Central ISD in San Antonio, Texas. And they stopped and said, that's the district we're talking about. It's not only state recognized, it's nationally recognized for the efforts that have gone to. So I'm very proud to be a citizen, and I'm very proud to be a parent and a taxpayer in this district, and I applaud the practices that they've done, and I know that we can continue to do more. Trauma-informed practice is what's really the focus of the EC Cares. I'm not the expert on it, but it does provide additional emotional support for our students. But it's important that it's not just our faculty and our administrative staff who are identifying these propensities, if you will, for these types of risk behaviors that we now know to be associated with someone that may become a perpetrator, are harmful to themselves or others. It's important that we continue to educate our parents in the district. It's important that we continue to inform those guardians, whomever surrounds that student or that child, that they be well educated and informed of what the resources are available to them if they see these types of behaviors. And there's many resources that are readily available to individuals through the school, but also through other institutions who serve anyone from any socioeconomic status.
David, I want to let you get a word in here.
That's all right.
And probably in the Sutherland Spring shooting, I can't even call it warning signals. It's just you want to tear your hair out at all of the things that happened to that individual where he was allowed to proceed.
There were plenty of warnings for him. And most of these other shootings, there's plenty of warnings also. But I would like to say that either program that's picked, political correctness has got to be taken away and out of the system. Who's going to have a gun in the hallway if their gun is under their table or in a safety lock box or a quick open box under their table that only their fingerprints can open, or a quick combination, whatever it may be. But school is let out. People in the hallways, outside. You're one of these people that are supposed to have a gun, and an active shooter situation starts. Now you've got to go run somewhere to go find your gun and run back over there. That's not much different than the initial guy that showed up at the Parkland shooting in Florida. But the other thing I was going to say is, I think teachers especially and students should be extremely vigilant on watching people and paying attention to whether you have a gun on your side or not. Our emphasis with school nowadays, we live in a fallen world, and we live in a world where there's danger, and we live in a world where there's bad people. And with a bunch of good people, wanting no problem, just wanting to live our lives out. But yet with those bad people, we as individuals have got to watch each and every person that walks in. I do concealed carry. I wasn't allowed to bring one on campus here, but I normally do. And it's a second nature deal now. And I'm watching anyway, whether I have a gun on my side or in my backpack or whatever. I'm watching everything happening anyway. Now, did I before? I sure didn't. I just went along and got along and everything was fine. So, the opportunities that the government had to see our shooter were plenty, the Parkland shooter, but the Santa Fe shooter was a surprise. He was a surprise to him. There was a shooter in Alpine, Texas 3 years ago, and spoke with the superintendent from that school, and the signs were there, but they didn't think so. And of course the signs were there, and he showed his face. I would like to just make a comment about 99% of those shooters. The shooter in Las Vegas was an exception. They're cowards. And don't think anything different. They are 100% cowards. As soon as the bullets start flying at them, they're dropping their guns, dropping to the ground, or running. One of the shooters did shoot back and dropped his gun and gave up in Santa Fe. But as soon as somebody confronts them with another gun, and I don't have a stat on that, But everything we've paid attention to this last 18 months, as soon as somebody confronts them with a gun, they give up, or they run, or they might even kill themselves, which all is good. Less people are shot.
Well, one of the things we're trying to do too in our world in school, and again, it's a holistic approach. It's not just worrying about strictly the bad guy before we begin. There's a certain place for mental health, there's a certain place for staff, and then staff training where they understand the proper things. You guys have done this electronically, I think now. I've got one of these in every classroom in our school district, and we train on it. But it's hard to know those targets where you don't know who's in there. If there's a sign on that door that says, we have armed staff in here to protect our students as well as our police officers, you may think twice before you go in there, because that's a hardened target. It's one of the things I learned in Israel that they really believe in. That's layering of security, layering of that process, and it's not just any one thing. It's not just any one level. Monitoring of social media is extremely important. Looking to make sure you see if there's anybody at risk there that pops up on the screen to get some, like Laura involved in that. Correct, I'm married, I'm sorry, involved in that. But also, let them go somewhere else. If you've hardened up your targets, let them go somewhere else because they're not going to be sure they're going to encounter somebody. Because what they're looking for is to inflict damage. Now, there are some cases of targeted violence where they're looking to go after a particular person who's wrong on there, or they're perceived wrong. But certainly, a lot of times they're just looking to count. And I'm never going to mention their names. I will in a group of law enforcement officers, if that's what we're talking about. We're talking about a particular shooter, but we don't want to mention their names in this setting.
Laura, before we go to the audience?
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that because I was trying to find any research that actually could demonstrate that the presence of a sign or that there were armed individuals was any kind of a deterrence. And I just came across, and I have some statistics about it that kind of address that. More than half of mass shooters are suicidal, and 10, and I'd agree with you in that case, cowards. Many of them have studied other mass shootings, and they know they're not going into that with any likelihood of walking away from it. We've seen that in mostly school shootings, that's suicidal. They want the notoriety. They either, and there's even the term, as our law enforcement officials know, of suicide by cop. So it may be that they take their own mind for it. It may be that they put themselves in that position. Some of them do change their mind at the last minute. There's no real way to study deterrence. You can't really do a study to say, would you have done that right? I mean, so that's kind of hard. And I also want to say that I also don't agree with having a gun locked away because I also think that would be ridiculous. And when you're talking about less than 3 minutes, so I wasn't advocating for the Marshall program either, to be honest. And I do want to say that the gun in the hallway. So I'm just thinking about where my classroom was. It was upstairs. It was in a building separate from our newest, one of the older buildings. And I was at the head of the stairwell. So if anybody had come in there, even if there were, say, 5 armed guardians in that math science building, they may still be just as far away than our law enforcement officers would be that were armed. So again, I'm just kind of missing sort of that idea that I just hate for us to buy into some idea that more armed people is a deterrent. It hasn't panned out that way, that more armed, untrained, not law enforcement officers who have been trained to focus on that and make those decisions as part of their job, that if we're going to be spending money, why isn't it on that, or why isn't it on our own, expanding our own development of our students?
Let me just jump in. How many of you have questions that you want to jump into the conversation? Oh, good. We have a lot of hands. So can we get the folks with the microphones deployed in the audience? And again, I want you to be respectful of your fellow citizens and not make speeches, but ask questions. Do you want to make a quick point while we get the microphones out to the people?
Well, the thought of could a gun help, or the security the on-campus police was about the same distance away. I understand that thinking, but in every one of those shootings that we've talked about today, it's soon as somebody shoots back or puts a gun toward them, the killing stops. That's what's most important. If a shooter comes in, I'm not going to sit here and say 100 armed people couldn't or will stop one man from killing 5 people, but 100 armed people might keep him from killing 50 people. And if an armed guy comes in ready to kill all defenseless people, he's shooting fish in a barrel. He's got no deterrent. There's nothing going to slow him down until the first guy shows up and shoots at him.
Okay, point taken. Do we have the gentleman here with the lady? Go ahead, please.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. This question may be directed to Mr. Ellis. So, can you speak on the fact that any schools that may already arm their staffs and how they feel about it and how that's, working out for them?
I can't. I haven't done that research to
Okay,
talk.
because I did see, like, they were suspended one time, a teacher carried a firearm in their boot, so I didn't know if there's other schools that may have already implemented that.
I know some schools have taken those steps, but I haven't had time to sit down and research that to see how well it's worked out.
I think the latest numbers I've seen from the Texas Tribune, the 200 of the 1,200 school districts in Texas have implemented some sort of armed teacher program, but they're almost all small rural districts, and there have been no incidents. So it's an untested proposition. Let's go over to this side. We'll go back and forth. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I currently live in the district, and I've had daughters that are currently here. I grew up in the district. I graduated back in the 80s, so it's a long time ago. But my question is to Mr. Ellis. Chief, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics Crime Victimization Survey, only 20% of highly trained law enforcement officers hit their target in an armed confrontation with someone. What leads you to believe that teachers who are not as highly trained as those officers will be able to hit their target? Thank you.
I don't think you're going to see the statistics be any different. I really don't. What you're talking about is combat under stress. I don't know if you're going to see those be any different.
And you think the teacher will do as good as a highly trained law enforcement officer stopping that target?
If that person is trained, if that person's got all the 3 things I just mentioned a while ago, I think that if they train hard, that's going to be the key thing, is make sure that if the training is done well and the policies are followed. I've got people that shoot as well as my police officers, or even better, that are just competition shooters, or they just like to shoot, that can outshoot my guys. So I think your statistics are probably going to be about the same.
Let's go back over here, please.
Hi. I kind of want to bring it back to what our district is actually attempting to implement, and that's the Guardian Plan. So I've heard that this will be a volunteer program, that teachers like myself will be able to volunteer. So my question really is if at one campus we have, let's say, 5 people who volunteer and 3 only qualify and make it through the battery of tests or psychological exams. So we have maybe 3 guardians at one campus, but then we have another campus where there's a possibility with nobody going through and passing any of these trainings or examinations. What happens then? How is it going to be equal? What information or what suggestions have been given to our district and our school board to show that each school will be armed and protected and have the same safety implementations as all the rest, if and knowing that this is a volunteer program, not a mandatory?
I think that's a really good question. I'm glad the trustees are here tonight. We don't have a district representative on the panel, but I think one of our goals tonight was to let them hear what ifs, because the devil's in the details, and as we get down to talking about the reality of trying to implement something, that kind of feedback from you, a teacher, is very valuable to them, and it's valuable, frankly, to us in the media as we consider how we report back to communities on what their school boards are doing. So I'm glad you asked that question, even if we can't answer it tonight, and I think it's one that will hang in the air that people will have to debate. You want to go back over here?
Thank you. And to the gentleman in front of me, you asked the question I was going to ask, so I'm going to ask my follow-up question, which is, if we have had highly trained officers, for example, the officer in Parkland who took cover as opposed to shooting back. We also had the officer in Thousand Oaks, California, who the police officer who was killed by friendly fire. What level of friendly fire incident where the armed teacher shoots an unarmed student are we going to consider as acceptable? In my opinion, that answer is going to be and always will be zero.
Anybody like to take that one on? Maybe another way of asking that, Chief, is that no matter what we do, there are pros and cons to it.
Absolutely. I mean, this is not without risk. I mean, there absolutely is not without risk. And, and I pray every day that none of my folks and myself have to pull a weapon. But I'll tell you this, I was a conservation ranger, a game warden for the state of Georgia. That's what they call them in Texas, too. Game warden for most of my career. I retired from that job and got into education. I will tell you this, I pulled my weapon probably once every 5 years for something there, and usually it was if I caught somebody posing or something like that, and they were acting funny, I just kind of pulled my weapon and held out by the side until they put 30-06 rifle down and carry it. Since I've been a school district police officer, I pulled my weapon 3 times on school campuses. And all 3 of them, thank God, I did not have to squeeze that trigger. But I was prepared to, and I almost did on a couple of those occasions. One of them involved a parent that was upset that stuck a gun in his waistband and started charging toward the inside of the school. A guy I knew, and I almost had to kill him. Another was a former student that had a knife, and another was a former student that brought a gun to a basketball game. So none of the stuff's without risk, and you hope you're going to react as you train. But when things like that happen, there's no guarantees. Nobody's going to guarantee you there's not going to be collateral damage. Nobody's going to guarantee you that the shot placement is going to be greater than 20%. All you can do is train and hope that you're training. You train till you fail, and then you try to do a failure analysis on that failure and see if you can train even harder.
But it would be disingenuous to say that bad things won't happen.
Oh,
Because they will.
Absolutely.
Did someone over here have a point to make?
I was just thinking the same way, that in a chaos situation as a mass shooting, you've got bodies everywhere. You've got the kids everywhere that are scrambling, and those targets are students. They're not targets. They're students. And I'm as concerned about the safety of our volunteer guardians and what that would mean to them, and the help that we'd be able to give them as a district in the case of that, and the liability, and just all of those complications.
Well, hopefully, if you have those sheepdogs there, people that's going to come do bad things at your school are going to get shot somewhere else.
Okay, let's go back over here.
I want to thank you guys for coming out here and talking about this issue. It means a lot to me as a student here at Central. A few days ago, an armed robber broke into my house while me and my little sister were there.
Can you speak into the microphone a little bit closer?
Oh, sorry. A few days ago, an armed robber broke into my house with me and my little sister there. And I can attest to what David had said, that you don't know how much you really want some kind of armament until you're in the position where you have to defend yourself for safety reasons. But I would like to ask, for whoever would like to answer it, what emotional precedent these plans would have for students in the classroom having to watch someone else, cause bodily harm to another human being. What precedent would that set for these upcoming students that we're sending out into the world? Thank you.
What's that?
I don't think they.
Can somebody repeat the question for him?
The volume.
The volume just didn't get here to us.
How would it affect the other students seeing someone's life being taken by a teacher?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I think for that matter, we have to discuss tonight that students are the minority in this conversation, as in minors. They're not adults, but they're not getting a say in this conversation. And I would imagine, particularly high school students who are young adults, probably have some very strong feelings about this. either way, but wanting to be part of the conversation and how districts take responsibility, which they're charged with, but at the same time tell students what they think matters that's a conundrum we haven't really explored.
It is. From a mental health standpoint, we know that trauma has a significant impact on a lifetime of recovery. We know that grief and loss has a significant impact on a lifetime recovery. And I would say from the mental health perspective is when someone has experienced some of these types of things, and David can attest to this, it's important to engage with people trained to help walk them through this. This is the what if it happens after an outcome, which is not where we want to be talking tonight, but we know it's the reality of what potentially could be based upon our national experience and experiences within. So I could review certainly the whole host of trauma responses. We could talk more in detail, and I don't know if we want to use our time that way tonight.
But you've worked counseling the survivors of Sutherland Springs. David has a friend who I've been on a panel with before who survived the rack space. He's paraplegic. But how are they really doing after all this counseling? Has it destroyed lives? Are people coming back? David seems like a very resilient individual, but is he the exception to the rule?
I can speak from our experience in working with so many of the families that were directly affected in this shooting. And I can tell you that, and I've said from the very beginning, as media has came to the community, both from a local media standpoint to a statewide, national, and internationally, that this community is a faith-filled community. This community has used that particular perspective of who they are in their recovery. It has come to some degree with assistance from trained professionals. That has been helpful to them. They're doing remarkably well, but there are scars that will be with them for the rest of their life. Particularly our young people who were affected, who lost parents, who lost siblings. There's a lifetime of recovery in this. It doesn't mean that it cannot happen. Healing can come, and healing comes at a pace that's unique to that individual. Not that's necessarily standard out of a textbook, that it takes so many months or so many years.
Well, but I think you brought up a really good point, which is trustees and school administrators and leaders need to be thinking about how are the students coping with whatever we decide to do one way or the other. I appreciate that question. Are we over here? Down here we have a question, gentlemen.
Hello, my name is Jim McNamara. I qualify to be here as a taxpayer. I've got 3 questions I'm going to put out. I don't expect you to answer them, but I do expect you to start thinking about it. Number 1, if education, elevates, how does arming teachers and staff elevate our minds, our learning, and our hearts? Question number 2, how is it that the safety efforts that we talk about and try to derive do not address appropriate efforts to reduce gun access, gun forms, and the mentality of embracing guns? Number 3, why do we reinforce these acts with so much press coverage, video news, social media, and other means by which all the details, all the actions, all the horror are repeated and reinforced, not in my mind, but in the minds of people who are contemplating this sort of activity? Thank you.
Anybody want to take one or more of those? Obviously, the national debate that's parallel to this is over access to guns. If you're a school administrator in East Central, you're probably saying to yourself, that debate is not going to be resolved in the near term. We need to make decisions now based on what current laws and practices are.
In the 5 months following Sandy Hook, just the exposure, the number of Google searches about cleaning guns, buying guns, because there's a school shooting or a mass shooting, and then there's talk about potential tightening of gun controls. And in that 5 months post Sandy Hook, 3 million more guns, as measured by number of background checks, were purchased than average. Not just 3 million guns, but 3 million is more than average. Correlation isn't causation, but there's a trend that talking about it increases sales, increases exposure, and then as the medical community said, if you look at the Bureau of Vital Statistics for that same 5 months, the number of accidental injuries from guns increases. And I have the same question, what are we teaching our students? We're teaching students that guns are still the answer to the problem of guns, and that's illogical to me. That's illogical to me.
So
I
people,
don't have an answer exactly to your question, sir, but let me say this. I live on the coast, so definitely part of our school safety plan deals with hurricanes. I can stand there on the beach and pretend they'll never come before I can prepare for that.
so your point being that guns are out there. and
They're here. You can stop manufacturing them tomorrow. You can stop building, you can put, I'm not going to mention any particular gun manufacturer's name, but you can put them all out of business tomorrow. But still,
I think play the devil's advocate and say that during the Clinton administration, semi-automatic weapons for all practical purposes were banned, assault weapons, and that's now 20 plus years ago. So people don't tend to think about that anymore. We almost take for granted that, assault weapons are not part of the culture. But would you be in favor? Law enforcement at the time strongly opposed lifting those bans.
well, I can tell you this, Bob, as a game warden, I had many a person hand me a gun that was considered to be an assault weapon under that ban, that ban that was lawfully owned prior to that ban. They were out there. I'm not going to get into a gun control debate. That's not what we're here for. But they're out there, and for us not to prepare to deal with that aspect of having someone who's intent on evil deeds, I don't understand that right.
I'm a deer hunter. I think you ought to be able to get the job done with one shot.
Really, that's what the Second Amendment's about.
And
So
why-
I can't agree with that. The amendment says not to be infringed on. So that
The
debate.
amendment says what?
The amendment says that. The Second Amendment says we have the right to own and bear arms, but it also says not to be infringed on. But the gun issue is not the thing. Are you implying that we shouldn't be talking about what your first statement? Are you implying that we shouldn't be worried about this? We shouldn't be talking about guns or arming teachers and just worry about education? That's putting our head in the sand and they're not worried about something else is going to happen. It's going to happen somewhere, but if it was to happen here, the school district's got the wherewithal to let's have a game plan. Let's worry about this now, so if it does happen, we can look at our parents and our teachers and everybody and say, we did everything possible to keep this from happening. And not, I wish we would have done something.
Yeah, I think in defense of the gentleman, a lot of people wish the debate was a much broader one, but again, if you're Roland Toscano and you're running the East Central School District, you've got to make some tough decisions now. But I think he makes a very valid point, and a lot of people in the United States wish we were having a much broader conversation about the role of guns in all of these mass shootings. And Laura, do you want to add to that?
I want to kind of move away from gun control because then that's polarizing and we're not working on a solution. We're just espousing a political divide. As a classroom teacher in the years past, I did wonder what happens if I were an armed guardian and failed to respond appropriately. We saw that in Parkland, and so that man became the center of, and granted, that was his primary responsibility. That's what he was hired as a resource officer, not as an educator. He was also volunteering to serve in this capacity. And have we had those conversations? That's just my question. Maybe very well you've had these conversations. What kind of conversations have we had about what kind of liability would a parent want to, sue that guardian because they didn't render the appropriate aid, or all of the liability and legalities and responsibilities that go with that? I think that's a really important conversation that has to take place.
We were supposed to finish at 7:57 and it's 8:02. Can we give this gentleman the last question and then we'll wrap up? No. Keep going. I'll stay as long as you want.
My name is James Chatham. I'm currently employed by the Transportation Department here at East Central. My only question is, if I'm assigned as to take out a threat. I want to make sure, because I'm there, it's going to be over in 2 minutes. I want to make sure that these guys, when they come in to get to respond, they don't shoot me
Oh, absolutely.
as a point.
Absolutely.
As I want to make sure I'm identifiable as the good guy